Welcome back, everyone. Unfortunately, for video purposes, it looks like the snow has passed us by here. This time, at least. Everything's just soggy and nasty from the rain. Oh well, we'll make do with what we have. Gotta make the best of it, right? I have two more encounters for you guys tonight. I have one out of Texas and another one from Wisconsin. Man, I swear, Wisconsin and Minnesota, I've received so many encounters from up that way. If anyone ever suggests that I visit either one of those states, I will politely decline. Well, I've gotten a late start here. A lot later than what I anticipated, so let's go ahead and get into tonight's encounters. Grab a drink, lock your doors and windows, hit the lights, and let's get started. The Plywood Palace wasn't just a bar. It was a way of life for the kind of people who had nowhere else to be. It sits right at the edge of a thick pine forest, and it's barely lit by a single buzzing neon beer sign. It looks like a forgotten relic of better days. I've been tending bar there for about 6 years. 6 long years of night shift. 6 years of knowing every inch of that warped floorboard and every face that dragged itself through the front door. My name is Dean, and I'm 29 years old. I was born and raised right here in Makwa, Wisconsin. My folks own a little hardware store here in town. They had this big idea that someday I'd take it over and carry on the family name. But what they didn't know is at the time I had other plans. I tried college for a while, out in Milwaukee, but it just didn't seem to be for me, and it didn't stick. I dropped out after about a year, completely burned out and broke. I came crawling back to the town with nothing to show for it, except a pile of student debt and a sense of failure that I couldn't seem to escape. The Plywood Palace wasn't my dream job by any means, but it at least paid the bills, and it gave me a place to hide from the world for a little bit. The evening shifts at the bar suited me. I wasn't much of a people person, but I had a knack for reading folks, and that came in pretty handy, spending time behind the bar. Most nights it was the same old routine, pouring drinks for the regulars, listening to their stories, and cleaning up after the last call. It wasn't what I would call ideal, but at least I felt safe there. At least until the strangeness all started happening around the place. The first time Jay mentioned the thing in the woods, I laughed at him so hard I almost pissed myself. Jay was a regular. He was grumpy, grizzled, and half pickled by cheap whiskey the majority of the time. One night he was so pissed drunk, falling off his stool, and he asked me if I'd ever seen anything weird out back or anywhere around the bar. He was leaning across, trying to keep his voice low like he didn't want anyone else to hear him. I asked him what in the hell he meant by weird, because I've seen a lot of weird people around here. I thought he was talking about raccoons digging through the dumpsters again or something else. I was kind of sniggering, and he got a little angry, and he didn't seem to think it was funny. Instead, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "No, something big back there. I've seen it." something with yellow eyes. I rolled my eyes and topped off his drink, but he wasn't willing to let this go. He continued on, saying that it wasn't just him, and he told me to ask around that other people have seen it as well. He said it's big, walks like a man, but it's not a man, and it's out there watching every one of us. I just assumed it was another one of Jay's stories, but over the next couple weeks, I started hearing the same thing from other regulars. Stories about glowing eyes in the woods. Loud, heavy footsteps outside of their homes at night. Some even told me they had heard strange growling sounds coming from behind the bar in the trees when they were in the parking lot. This all sounded like a bunch of drunks, either hallucinating or telling some bullshit stories to anyone who would listen. A Friday night rolled around. It was after 1 or 1:30. The place was pretty quiet. There were only 2 customers left inside the bar. There was a couple of guys slouched over at a corner table with more empties than full ones. I was behind the bar, cleaning up for the night, when I heard something out back. It was loud. It sounded like someone took a run and slammed their shoulder against the back door. I stopped in the middle of putting a glass back on the shelf. I heard it again. This time it was accompanied by a sound that I can only describe as someone scraping a knife blade on the outside of the back door. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what I was dealing with. I considered it could be someone trying to break in, but why? It could be a bear, I suppose. Maybe it had smelled the food scraps in the dumpster. But something about that scraping sound, something just wasn't right about this entire situation. I made my way to the back door, grabbing a flashlight that I kept under the counter. The thudding sounds had stopped, and now it was just super quiet. There was a small, nasty little window in the door. I aimed the flashlight through the glass and tried to get a glance outside. I didn't see anything, just the parking lot. It was empty, except for the outlines of a few cars under the security light. I let out a sigh of relief and was about to turn away when I heard a growl from behind me. There was something right outside of that door, and it did not sound like it was happy. I took a few steps back away from the door out of pure instinct. I didn't know what it was out there, and I wasn't taking any chances. It could be a bear, after all. Then things got really crazy. Something slammed into the door again, but this time the door flew open. The force of the door knocked over a stack of boxes and sent me flying backwards onto the floor. I looked up to see something standing in the doorway. It was only half lit by the light from outside. It was standing on its back legs, but hunched low. Thick shoulders that were really wide, and its body was impossibly huge. This thing was massive. It was covered in this dark brown, thick fur. My mind still thought I was looking at a bear until my eyes made contact with its face. This thing had an identical face structure and head shape of a wolf. It had the pointy ears. It had the long canine snout. Think of it this way. Just take a grizzly bear's body and slap a giant wolf head on top. That's what I was looking at. And there I saw the color of the eyes. All I could think about was Jay and all the other people trying to tell me about this thing they had seen. Bright yellow, glowing, staring at me so intensely it made me feel like I was going to have a heart attack. I stood to my feet and started making my way back to the bar. I grabbed a baseball bat that I kept there. I was so scared that I nearly dropped it a few times. I couldn't seem to get a good grip. The thing lowered its face and stared at me from the top of its eyes. I don't speak Dogman, but from the way it was looking at me, it was pretty much daring me to try and swing that bat. For a minute, I thought it was going to attack me. I didn't feel good about my chances with the baseball bat either. But it was all I had. There was no one to yell to for help because the two guys in the bar were passed out in the corner. So I stood my ground and I braced for impact. It never took one step inside that door. It just stood there in the opening. I saw its ears perk up and begin twitching. It quickly turned its attention toward the front of the bar. A truck was coming down the road, its headlights cutting through the parking lot. I heard the creature let out a snarl before retreating back into the woods. I just stood there holding that bat, staring at the open door, waiting for it to come back in and drag me off. My knees buckled and I hit the floor. I didn't even try to move until I heard the truck pull into the lot and someone got out and slammed the car door. When the driver, a tired-looking delivery guy, was bringing kegs and he finally stepped inside. I could barely even form words to tell him what had just happened. Of course, he thought I was drunk or insane, or maybe both, I'm not sure. He dropped off a few kegs and soon after left with a very concerned look on his face. I finally got the two guys that were passed out of the bar so I could lock up and leave myself. I didn't sleep for nearly 3 days after that happened. If I hear any noise outside of my window, I would completely freak out. I always felt like something was watching me for the entire time during those 3 days. My very next shift that I had to work, I told Jay what had happened. He smiled and nodded like he'd been expecting me to tell him this. He just said, "Told you. It don't bother you unless it wants to." And the last thing he said is something that will bother me for the rest of my life. His exact words were, "You're lucky. It changed its mind." What the hell does that even mean, and how does he know the thing changed its mind? I began noticing a lot of small things after that, little things that I wouldn't have paid attention to before. More scratching on the back door sometimes. I found some strange prints in the dirt beside of the dumpster. More than once. Occasionally there would be a lingering smell of something decaying mixed with wet fur, and it wouldn't go away for hours. I could not take it, so a couple weeks after all that happened, I quit my job at the Plywood Palace. I moved to a completely different town, where the woods didn't press in so close, and I didn't have to work at nighttime. I could never forget what I witnessed break down that door that night. I can't explain any of it. I can't explain the glowing yellow eyes. I can't explain the look of the creature. And most of all, I can't explain why something has seen me, really seen me, and decided to let me go. There's definitely something back there in those woods. I have a feeling it's been out there longer than we have. If you have any sense at all, you'll stay away from that place. Anonymous. Tonight's second encounter. My name is Serenity. I'm 46 years old. Back in 1998, when I was around 20, I worked at a remote truck stop in rural Texas. I was just a store clerk working the graveyard shift. I never planned to stay in one place for very long, especially not in rural Texas. When I graduated high school, my only goal was to get out of my small hometown, find a good college somewhere far away, and start my life. But unfortunately, life has a way of dragging you back down. Bills continued to pile up faster than I could pay them, and when my car broke down halfway through my road trip west, I found myself sleeping in my car, stranded in a tiny town with no money and no one to call for help. I got lucky and landed a job at the truck stop. It was supposed to be temporary, just enough to save up for car repairs and move on. But weeks turned into months, and before I knew it, I was working there full time, stuck in the same kind of dead-end town that I'd tried so hard to escape from. The truck stop itself was just as depressing. It sat on a desolate stretch of highway, miles from the nearest town in the middle of nowhere. The pay was terrible, but at least night shift let me work in peace most of the time. No one bothered me much except the occasional trucker that was passing through. Some nights I would actually get lonely. It was the most uneventful job I've ever had. Until one night something changed all of that. That's what I'm here to tell you about. The weird story started about a week before my actual encounter happened. It was night, and I was stocking snacks when a bearded trucker walked in. He grabbed a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. I can still hear his deep voice now. His voice had a casual tone, but his eyes had a different story. He had a serious look as he asked me if anyone ever seen anything weird out here. I only pretended to be interested, so I played along and asked him what he was talking about. He didn't sugarcoat things or beat around the bush. He instantly said big, like a wolf. A big wolf, but it stands on 2 legs instead of 4. In that very moment, I became very nervous, because here I am alone in the store with this big bearded trucker guy, and he's talking crazy about werewolves in the middle of Texas. I was praying that he was either drunk or on some kind of drugs. I didn't want to think someone was that crazy sober and in their right mind. I was done entertaining such a crazy idea, so I just giggled a little and told him that sounded like a bad campfire werewolf story. He didn't seem to like that very much, and he told me he wasn't joking, and he called me kid. He said one of the boys at the way station down the road said something had chased him last night. Left some pretty nasty claw marks on the side of his rig. I saw them myself. We talked for a little longer, but I didn't really listen to a whole lot of what he had to say. I had too much going on in my own life to try to deal with some kind of nonsense. That's what I was thinking at the time. But over the next couple of days, similar stories kept trickling in. A lot of drivers complained about hearing strange sounds while trying to sleep. Shadows moving between the parked trucks at night, and a few reported waking up to scratches on their trailers. I thought they were just a bunch of bored truckers messing around, until finally something happened to me. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a Thursday night. I remember hearing the overhead lights humming and the occasional rumble of a semi passing through. It was well after midnight. I stepped outside to have a smoke. The air was pretty cool and comfortable that night, and the lot was empty except for a couple of rigs parked on the far side. I was halfway through my cigarette when I caught sight of something moving fast between the trucks. In fact, it was so fast I couldn't even catch an outline or a shape of what it could be. It just looked like a really big shadow. The shadow stopped just outside of the light of the parking lot, and I swear to you, I could feel its eyes watching me. It's like its gaze was actually putting a physical weight on my shoulders. My stomach was twisted in knots. I backed towards the door, flicked my cigarette away, and was trying to get back inside. The very second I got back inside the store, I locked the door and headed for the counter. Not 5 minutes had passed, and I heard it banging on the back side of the building. It sounded like it was going to take the whole side of the wall out. No one was in the store at the time, it was just me. I knew I needed to call the cops or someone, so I ran into the stockroom near the back office. This is where the security monitors were all set up, on the grainy black and white screens. I saw something by the dumpsters. It was crouched down low to the ground. I could see it as it sniffed the air, then it stood up. You know how big a normal-sized dumpster is. The very top of the dumpster only came up to this thing's waist. Now, I don't know how tall that is, but I know that it's way taller than anything I can mention here. I've heard so many people give the same descriptions, so I'll save you the time and the trouble and tell you that it looked like a werewolf. Plain and simple. Period. It was just sniffing around looking for something, then it stopped and stared directly into the camera, almost like it knew I was watching. Then it took off toward the front of the store, out of the frame. Before I could even process what I was seeing, it was gone. Seconds later, I heard heavy footsteps near the front of the store. I had already made my way to the front and locked those doors as well, because I didn't know if this was someone trying to break in. All I could find to protect myself with was a tire iron. I just stood there as I watched a shadow pass in front of the glass doors, multiple times. The speed alone was unnerving. Nothing should be able to move at speeds like that. After it passed by 3 or 4 times, it finally stopped and stared at me through the glass. Slowly, it pressed a clawed hand against the door, dragging it downward. It knew how to open doors because it tried, and once it realized the door was locked, it let out this frustrated snarl and circled back around behind the building. I could hear it outside growling, and it was still scratching at the walls. My next move was to call the cops, but when I tried the phone, the line was dead. And this, like I said, was in 1998, so a cell phone was not an option. All I could do was lock myself in the stockroom, watching the monitors as the Dogman thing prowled through the lot. It stopped near an old oil drum by the edge of the property, sniffing and scratching at the ground. For a brief moment it seemed like it was distracted. That gave me the time to at least catch my breath and try to think about what I could do next. There's no way I could get out of there, and of course there were no customers coming in. I usually hated seeing those trucker guys come in because, let's be honest, a lot of them were lonely and they were perverts and would say nasty things. But at that moment, I was actually praying to see one of those guys. The night passed like this. Me huddled in the stockroom, clutching an old tire iron, while this thing roamed around outside. I stayed in there until morning. After first light, the thing had disappeared. I don't know if it went back into the woods or where it went, but I didn't really care at the time. I was just glad that it was gone. My shift ended and the owner showed up. I told him everything, not holding back a single detail. He thought I was playing a prank on him until he saw the damages to the building for himself. That's when he started talking about a rancher who used to own the land decades ago. Apparently the guy was raising wolves before he mysteriously vanished. I'm not sure what that story had to do with anything, but he felt the need to tell me. I quit that job that very day. I ran from the location, but unfortunately the encounter has stayed with me for the most of my life. I still can't go to sleep without checking out every window. Every time I'm convinced I'll see that thing staring back at me. But I never do. I've never seen it again. Even now, many years later, I do everything I can to avoid long stretches of isolated highways at night. Often I wonder why the thing didn't attack me. It could have gotten inside if it only wanted. Was it just curious, or was it warning me to leave? I still think about that truck stop a lot, and I wonder where that thing is now. I hate to sound mean, but I hope that it's dead, if that's even possible. I still don't even know what it is. One thing I will tell you, after what happened to me, along with all the other stories I've heard like this from rural Texas, I will never step foot back into the Lone Star State. I'm on the East Coast now, and the entire time I've been out here, which is the majority of my adult life, I've never ran into any dogmen here. That's not to say they're not here, because I've heard too many other encounters. I just haven't seen one myself. Hopefully I don't, because once is enough. Trust me. Everyone please be safe. Take care of yourselves, and God bless you. Serenity. Well, it's late, but as I promised, I delivered more encounters. I have been taking more time to read through these, and I try to put ones together that are similar in ways. Like these two are two different individuals in completely different states, having an encounter at their workplace. Thank you, Anonymous, and also you as well, Serenity, for submitting your encounters. It takes a lot of guts to do this, and most of all, you trusted me to narrate them for you. I truly appreciate the confidence, and I hope you don't feel like it was misplaced after hearing this. I have a few more prepared. I'll try to upload those earlier tomorrow. I'm going to do my best to crank out as many encounters as I can this weekend. As we all know, next week is Christmas, and things are going to get crazy around here. I want to thank you guys for listening and sticking with me this long. You guys are all legends, and I truly, truly appreciate it. That's going to do it for tonight. Before you go, please hit the like button, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, my friends, watch over your loved ones, keep your head on a swivel, and as always, good night.